Gen Z is grieving as TikTok is officially banned in the United States. So, guys, this is a very interesting situation. As many of you know, a few months ago, a TikTok bill was passed in the House. It went to the Senate, but they took no action on it. Recently, another bill was packaged along with a spending bill that President Biden said that he would sign off on, and it passed in the House, and it has now also officially passed in the Senate. So the TikTok ban has just passed the U.S. Senate. It's now one small step away from becoming law, and basically, considering President Joe Biden has previously said he would sign the bill, it now seems practically guaranteed that the TikTok ban will actually go ahead. 79 U.S. senators approved the TikTok ban, eclipsing the 18 who voted against it. The bill had passed the House of Representatives on Saturday, bundled with aid for overseas. It was the second time a TikTok ban had passed the House in as many months, with the previous bill having been stalled at the Senate. So this is it. This is pretty much it. And you know, I'm pleased about it. I'm glad that it's finally happened.
Bill basically just waiting the president's assent now. It's all but certain. The scene now set for a legal battle, it seems. How long could that drag on for? And what does it mean for a debate around the First Amendment?
Yeah, I think there's going to be, there's already promises that the company will file lawsuits trying to overturn this law and saying that it's unconstitutional and violating the First Amendment right to free speech. But the lawmakers say that they're very confident they'll prevail because this is a foreign-controlled company, and there's no right to free speech for a Chinese company. The right to free speech is for the people on TikTok. And so the argument is that this is very similar to regulations that the government has on who can own broadcast stations, for example, or radio stations. They've had these kinds of regulations in the past, but of course this is an immensely popular social media network that 170 million Americans are using. And so that makes it such a valuable resource if you're the Chinese government. And this is, something where it's going to be hard to see why China would be willing to let it go and let the algorithm and the wealth of data that it has potential access to here turn over to the Americans. So it's going to be potentially a long, dragged-out fight, although the legislation itself, it's supposed to be resolved, this divestment, within a year. But that'll be up to the courts to decide.
Yeah, the divestment within a year, so that takes us well past the US election. But in terms of a Chinese response, I mean, we've got the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, about to head to China. To what degree is this going to dominate the agenda?
I think it's going to become one of the big issues between, U.S. and China relations, because, if you think about it, there could be sort of tit-for-tat kind of things with retaliation. And there's certainly a lot of American companies doing business in China as well. And so I think that's something to watch, is whether this will have broader impacts on the overall relationship. Very important economic and political relationship between the two countries. But one thing that was clear, just talking to senators in both parties this week, is just how badly the lobbying effort, which was sweeping, expensive, and by TikTok to prevent this vote, just backfired. Senators were irate that even their own children were coming under assault from the children who were using TikTok.
I mean, this is just a big win for Mark Zuckerberg and Reels, Instagram Reels. That's where a lot of these Gen Z idiots will have to move over to that platform. and try to make a living on there, but it's not the same as TikTok. It's a lot more censored, it's a lot more controlled, and it's 100% not the same. And I'm just glad that TikTok is being banned. And to make matters more interesting, of course, they can try to sell TikTok, but it's going to be very difficult to do that. One, the Chinese government has to actually approve the sale. They have to approve, the United States gaining access to the algorithm that TikTok uses. So basically, how it serves the videos. Many of you might think that doesn't mean anything, but it means a lot. You can try to copy it all you want, but it's that specific algorithm that has drawn people in, and that is intellectual property that is owned by China. So they're going to have to sign off on that deal, and that would give America access to Chinese intellectual properties. And China very well is going to say no to that, because, China's going to look at it kind of like this. Yeah, the company is worth how much? It's worth this much money. And, let's say 25 billion or 50 billion. That's what the TikTok is saying, that the company is worth, like 50 billion on the US side. But for China, that's a kick in the bucket. That's a small kick in the bucket, versus them losing access to intellectual properties, to that technology, to the United States. They would just rather say no and let it be banned outright. Now, of course, they're not going to be pleased about this, because this is them losing access to a tool that allows them to potentially get at, it provides quite a bit of value for them. Let's just put it that way. And what I'm realizing here is that it's going to be a serious issue. And I think a lot of us just don't feel sorry for these billionaires. Like the creator of TikTok, he's going to lose a substantial amount of money, and trying to sell TikTok, because that's that is going to be a very, very big thing. Finding a buyer, no one's going to want to spend $50 billion on this thing, let alone $5 billion. I mean, trying to sell TikTok for $5 billion, that sounds more possible than getting what it's actually worth, around $50 billion.
At this point in time, it really just seems like a foregone conclusion. TikTok is going to be banned in the US. TikTok is going to push back on that ban with perhaps a protracted legal fight. Where do we go next, do you think?
Yeah, well, it certainly does feel like the clock is ticking for TikTok. Like you mentioned, it feels inevitable that this bill is going to become law. It was really smart for the U.S. House to include this bill in a package for foreign aid. There are obviously a lot of foreign policy concerns at play here that are outside of TikTok's control, but could ultimately play a determining role in its fate here. As you also mentioned, of course, TikTok is planning to wage what I believe will be a lengthy and intense legal battle. And what that means, though, is that this isn't necessarily the end. I'm framing it more as a new chapter in TikTok's drawn-out fight to survive here in the U.S. So we are still ways away from a TikTok-less America, but certainly as this bill advances, it does seem that the days are numbered for TikTok, at least how it currently operates here in the U.S.
And as we know, the US is the most important market for TikTok. It is present in a variety of other countries or regions. Do you think that TikTok can survive if it doesn't have its primary user base, or where it's getting most of its revenue from?
I mean, it's a great question, right? TikTok only, or the US only accounts for about 10% of TikTok's global users, but it accounts for up to or close to 50% of TikTok's worldwide ad revenues. And advertising, of course, is a core part of its business. So it is a very lucrative market for TikTok, and it would be a huge blow if it wouldn't be able to operate here. Now, TikTok also, of course, has other lines of business here in the US, including e-commerce. It's pushed really heavily into shopping through TikTok Shop. And so it's really counting on the U.S. to bring in revenue for the company. And again, it would have major ramifications on its business if it were to disappear from here.
Yeah, Jasmine, there's so many hypotheticals involved with this case and where it goes. And I mean, one possibility, if TikTok was divested, well, who would buy it? And what would happen to the data that is gathered over the years that the lawmakers are so worried about?
Yeah, both are excellent questions. I mean, I think it'll be hard to find a credible and approvable buyer. I mean, first, the buyer would need to have deep pockets, and many of the companies that could afford to buy TikTok would be no-goes because of regulatory and antitrust hurdles here. Now, of course, there are some buyers that have been circulating, and I'm sure that more buyers will throw their hat in the ring. It is a company that, you know, a lot of companies would like to get their hands on, particularly because of the coveted algorithm. I do think, you know, one of the things that's going to determine what a potential sale looks like is whether or not the algorithm is included. It will, you know, impact the price tag of TikTok. I think, you know, without it, it'll be probably valued less and maybe expand the list of potential buyers, but still, it's not going to be an easy task. Also, considering the fact that it's not just about the money. TikTok, of course, is an app that's heavily scrutinized, so whoever buys it would have to have a strong stomach as well.
No one's going to want to buy TikTok without the algorithm. If it were to ever sell without the algorithm, we're talking about maybe a couple $100 million at best. And then whoever picks it up would basically destroy the platform, because the algorithm is essentially what tells, you know, it basically uh, tells what video, it basically directs what video to whichever user. So that's the magic of TikTok, you know, being able to figure out which video should I serve to which user, and and how to keep that going. That is the magic. And without that algorithm in place, without that included in the sale, it's going to be very, very difficult for TikTok to find a buyer that's willing to spend billions of dollars on it. It may end up just becoming a total shell, and someone will pick it up again for just like the name in the United States, if they can even do that. Because again, China is going to be very, very uh, apprehensive about letting probably any part of this property go. So we're going to have to see how that ultimately plays out. But it's not going to be something that is settled immediately. But it's not going to, one way or another, it's not going to work out in the favor of TikTok. You know, regardless of who's in office, TikTok is getting banned. Trump wanted TikTok banned. Biden wants TikTok banned. Everyone wants TikTok banned except for Gen Z, you know, thing. And so, and of course, that makes it just so much better and so much sweeter. The TikTok ban is going to be very interesting, because when, you know, as the as the sale has come into question, and as the ban is going into effect, you know, they're going to be appealing. They're going to ask the federal court to put the law on hold in terms of going into effect. So they're going to basically say, well, until the court rules upon this, we don't want the ban on TikTok to go into place, you know, to go into effect. And, you know, the court should decide on whether or not TikTok could continue to exist, you know, if it's, you know, based on a First Amendment merits before anything is done, because, you know, it could create it could it could create irreparable harm to our business if, in the event we do triumph, it's already been banned, and we try to resurrect it. You know, what are we going to do? And the U.S. is not going to compensate us for those losses. But then the other argument could be that allowing TikTok to continue operating for years, you know, while the challenges are happening in court, it could spell a lot of issues for U.S. security. So saying, okay, well, we're just going to allow TikTok to continue operating for the next 2 or 3 years while it's going through the court system, and, you know, and it poses, you know, the reason why it's being banned is because it poses all of these threats as it is. But we're just going to put that aside and allow TikTok to continue posing those threats while it's working its way through the court system. That's a very, very hard pill to swallow. And as a result, we could see TikTok being banned entirely, you know, while it's working its way through the legal system. And then if TikTok were to triumph somehow, then they could attempt to resurrect the platform. But by then it would be dead, and people would have moved on from it. Because once the law goes into effect, Google and Google and and Google, Microsoft, Apple, you know, they would all have to ban TikTok from their stores, so it'd be no longer accessible there. Of course, you would be able to sideload TikTok, but some features in the application just would not work anymore. It become very difficult to update it. And Gen Z is not a very technical generation. It's not as simple as just tapping a button and oh, it's updating now. It won't be that smooth. It will not be that smooth. So eventually people will just move on from TikTok almost overnight. They'll keep using TikTok initially, but it'll just stop working very soon because it does need to have regular updates. So eventually the application will just stop working. They'll start having problems. A lot of people sign into TikTok using their Google account, for example. So using your Gmail account, you're able to sign into TikTok. And I'm assuming all of those people would lose probably instant access. So, boom, you no longer have access to your TikTok account. So a lot of people would lose access to their TikTok accounts almost instantaneously. But it's just not worth it. And once that happens, and all of the problems like your favorite content creator isn't there anymore, and people would just begin to migrate away from the platform immediately because it'd create tons of anarchy. But I'm really happy about this. I'm glad, I'm not going to say about anything regarding the rest of that bill, but the TikTok portion, them getting banned, and Gen Z really hurting over this, and it being something that really makes that affects their quality of life. I'm all for it because Gen Z is not a good generation. These people, they're we talk about bad apples, but it's a sack of bad apples. This is a sack of bad apples, and TikTok is just a terrible platform. And I'm just glad that it's finally getting its due desserts. Anyway, guys, don't forget that I have another channel called Angry where I discuss gaming, anime, geek stuff, nerd stuff, real world stuff, and whatever else interests me. There's a link to it in the description of the video. Go check it out, subscribe to the channel, support the content. Also, if you're enjoying the content on this channel and you want even more content like the content on this channel, head over to Men Walking Away. There's a link to the Men Walking Away channel description of the video. I post daily videos over on Men Walking Away. So check the channel out, subscribe to the channel, support my content. There's a link to the channel in the description of the video. What do you think regarding all of this? Gen Z is grieving as TikTok is officially banned in the United States. I'm just really happy about this. Let me know your thoughts on this and we'll talk about it in the comments. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, Men Walking Away. And cheers.